Good morning. Welcome to the Rivers Coalition meeting. It's November 19th in approximately 11. I'm also not Mark Perry. He sends his regrets, but he looks forward to the next membership meeting in January. I guess there's not a whole lot to say about the condition of the river except that it's awful. Um, the lagoon is slate gray and there's a heavy easterly flow, so we're getting a lot of backup. There's a lot of brown water coming from the lake. It's a mess. It's turbid. It's uh, it's not healthy at all, and the lagoon is suffering from our continuing discharges from Lake Okeechobee. Um, I guess at high tide we get a bit of a relief with a slug of uh, salt water coming in the inlet, but that's also turbid. It's really hard for the critters that live in the lagoon and the river to make a living. And so we need to, as the Rivers Coalition, I believe, keep our force strong and our voices clear, and demand clean water. Um, the There are some current action items. We've put into the newsletter a stop the flow uh, connection from the Friends of the Everglades. If you guys, your member organizations, want to sign on to that petition, please do. Um, we are not going to have a meeting in December, so our first meeting in January, we hope, will be Timothy Geisen from the Army Corps of Engineers, who was going to present today, but because there is a blue-green algae task force meeting, um, Greg Braun of the Guardians of Martin County has very graciously agreed to present today. I guess I should have said that this is America and we are very proud of our country. And so if you have a moment and you pass the American flag, please give it your regards and your respect. Um, we are, as I said, really fortunate to have Greg Braun presenting to us today. He is the executive director of the Guardians of Martin County. He's a biologist. He's a resident of Stewart or of Martin County, and the initiative that the Guardians have got going is the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters Conservation Initiative, and it's a very interesting program. And Greg will get deeply into that during his presentation. And I think it's really great to see locals getting engaged in trying to protect the headwaters of the Loxahatchee and the St. Lucie River. And this is one of those local initiatives that I think has a great deal of positive sort of potential impact, as well as good feelings for our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Greg Braun.
Thanks, Jim. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, well, good. So I am here today in my capacity as Executive Director of the Guardians of Martin County. The Guardians have been a member of the Rivers Coalition for many years, but many of you may not know too much about us. We kind of fly under the radar screen for a lot of the things that we do. So I'd like to start off with telling you a little bit about the Guardians before we get into today's program. We're a nonprofit conservation organization based here in Martin County, founded in 2005. We are governed by an all-volunteer board of directors, but we're a little bit non-traditional in the fact that there are no membership fees. Anybody can be a guardian. There's information about our organization on our website, theguardiansofmartincounty.org. Generally, we are a growth management organization. We advocate for responsible growth, and very definitely our overlap with the Rivers Coalition is our mission on behalf of advocating for clean water. So we primarily deal with the things that make Martin County different. And the tenets of our comprehensive growth management plan that make us stand out, we believe, are the county's protection of wetlands, our strict adherence to the urban services district boundaries, and our four-story height limit that we're trying to prevent from going to 5 stories. So it's these things that make the Martin County a great place to live and work and recreate. And so we do believe in responsible growth. And so one of these initiatives that we've been working on for over the last year has been this Loxa-Lucie Headwaters project. We share with you the mission of stopping the discharges from Lake Okeechobee, very definitely. And we agree in the power of the people and appreciate that it's the work of Mark Perry and the founders of the Rivers Coalition and all of you and your member organizations that have attracted the attention of our elected officials, some of whom have taken leadership positions to help us deal with the ever worsening situation of our surface waters. We were particularly appreciative of Senator Negron's work to push for the EAA reservoir and Water Management District Governing Board member Jackie Thurlow-Lippis for her ongoing advocacy for the replumbing of our area to address our ongoing water quality problems. We're hopeful that through the implementation of Representative Debbie Mayfield's Clean Waterways Act of 2019, that FDEP will revise its water quality standards and their protocols to reduce the further degradation of our waters. Clearly, what we've been doing for the last several decades is not working. So with that sort of an introduction, if I'm able to share the screen and pull up a PowerPoint presentation. So are you all seeing the slide number 1, the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters?
Yes.
Okay. So consistent with the old adage of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, the Guardians recognize that what's going on in our waters is directly related to what's going on the land. And while we firmly stand with all of you that the discharges from Lake Okeechobee must be dealt with, we believe that there's a simultaneous and equally challenging need to address the runoff that originates from within our own drainage basins. Martin County has done an excellent job at retrofitting surface water management systems in our old neighborhoods. Recent studies have shown that the exceedingly high cost to remove phosphorus and nitrogen from our waters, which is a key goal of the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters, is to prevent more nutrients from entering the South Fork of the St. Lucie River and the Loxahatchee. So let's start off with what are headwaters. This aerial photo taken by local artist Jeffrey Smith says it all. Headwaters are the low-lying areas from which surface water seeps towards creeks, streams, and rivers. You can't paddleboard or kayak or canoe in headwaters. In fact, during the dry season, you may not even get your feet wet. But during the rainy season, these wetlands fill up and begin flowing toward the water bodies in which you can do these things. In Martin County, they are the mosaic of pine flatwoods and wetlands that by and large are out of sight, and therefore they're kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of vegetative communities. They get very little respect. The project that we're working on is shown on slide 2 here, and I've got slide numbers down in the bottom right-hand corner so to make sure we all stay up with things. So generally, we're looking at the area east of I-95, west of sort of the urban boundary of the US 1 corridor, between Cove Road on the north and Jonathan Dickinson State Park on the south. Bridge Road is the only major feature that sort of crosses through this area and affects water flow. I've got a couple sort of preliminary slides to kind of give you the big picture of what's going on. And so this particular figure was taken from back in August of 2011. And at that time, you can see that these areas that are shown within the yellow oval were designated for conservation. So you can see here that green and gray are existing or the properties that were existing publicly owned lands at that time. Red were the ones that were designated for conservation. So these are the ones that we're talking about now. And then certainly blue is the C44 reservoir in STA. So the bottom line is that these were designated 2011 or before for this sort of conservation, but unfortunately we have really made no significant progress in acquiring any of these during this last 10-year period. Sort of at the same time, I've got this figure that shows sort of an environmental sensitivity heat map where the entire Martin County was evaluated based on those various parameters that you see over on the right. And essentially the higher the environmental value, the brighter the red or orange color. So the areas that we're talking about here, some of which are in public ownership and some in private, certainly rank high in environmental quality. Simultaneously, they are part of this statewide Florida wildlife corridor. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but they've got a website that describes their initiative to try to enhance the protection in this wildlife corridor throughout the whole state. So as you can see from the map on the left, most of this is west of Lake Okeechobee, but the portion here in our area includes the area within this Loxa-Lucie headwaters. Part of the reason that the Guardians, excuse me, are interested in this is that we recognize that the state of Florida, through the management of Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park and Jonathan Dickinson, have identified these areas as being advantageous to the state's ability to manage those state parks. So if you're familiar at all with how the state goes through the process of their management plans, they're required, both when a new state park is acquired or during the ongoing management of a park, they adopt this management plan. And one of the things they're required to do is say, if the world was a perfect place here, what adjoining properties would we have as part of the state park that would help us manage our own properties? So these two figures are taken out of the management plans for Jonathan Dickinson on the right and Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park on the left. So the bottom line is that if we're able to bring these properties into state ownership, the state would indeed take on the long-term management responsibilities. So how do they go about implementing that? It's through the state's Florida, or the state of Florida's Florida Forever land acquisition program. So many of you will know that recent administrations have not been kind to the Florida Forever program, but this past year, the state legislature and Governor DeSantis appropriated $100 million towards this land conservation initiative. So back many years ago, when these lands were designated as being important for the Atlantic Ridge and Jonathan Dickinson, an application was put together, submitted into the state for something called the Atlantic Ridge Ecosystem Florida Forever Project. So this is the map out of that program. It's been on the state's acquisition list for years, but due to the lack of funding in recent years, we just haven't been in the money for it. And we're ranked on the list, but we're kind of low. And so what this whole initiative is intended to do is sort of jumpstart that land acquisition program. To give you a better picture with the aerial photograph as the underlay here, I'm showing Bridge Road there in the white and the existing state parks outlined in green. So many of you won't be aware that the Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park is actually two disjunct properties. There's one that you can access there on the east side of the South Fork, but then there's a several 100-acre tract over behind the Medalist that currently is essentially inaccessible. So part of these lands, and if you can see my clicker here in this area, the desire is to bring those into public ownership such that the Atlantic Preserve State Park will kind of cross that boundary and include all of these lands. I've got Jonathan Dickinson down here, and certainly these are all tied into the Palmar complex down here to the further to the southwest. So why has this risen to the point where there's a grassroots effort to try to get this whole program going? We believe that there are several reasons why not only the Guardians, but the community at large will support this. First off, as you can see from these two Google Earth images, you've got Bridge Road looking east from not too far from I-95, looking east towards Hobe Sound, and then on the right, the gateway into Jupiter, Indiantown Road. So certainly in the existing conditions with wetlands coming up to Bridge Road on both the north and the south side, the ecological communities and the watersheds are essentially intact. Land is somewhat reasonably priced, and certainly it is in restorable condition as opposed to there at Indiantown Road. We've lost the battle, and we're trying to deal with challenges with water quality and connectivity of habitat. More specifically, how this relates to the Rivers Coalition and our joint concerns about water quality in the South Fork. I'm using this map that many of you will be familiar with, Mark Perry and FOS's routine monitoring of water quality. And this map that shows what's going on gives us a kind of a snapshot week to week as to what the condition of our waterways is. And so this one you can see was from about 2 months ago, back in September. And I show this one because it's particularly pertinent to what we're trying to do here. And that is, this is before the Corps started discharging through the C-44 from Lake Okeechobee and the St. Lucie locks. And particularly our area of interest is this part of the South Fork that FOS refers to as the winding South Fork. And you see the water quality here is red, it's F, it's destructive. What we're trying to do is sort of turn things around so that we can address water quality improvement projects through the acquisition of conservation lands to try to improve the quality of the water in that area. So part of the things that cause the Guardians our concern, some concern are projects that have been approved by the County Commission in the recent past. There's a project here where they have approved comprehensive plan amendments to allow several hundred homes within the watershed to the South Fork. There's also a project here for another 100 homes on the south side of Cove Road on about 100 acres. And then more recently, 1 million square foot sort of warehouse type facility. With the current regulations, certainly the Guardians have concerns that there's no way that these projects are going to have an advantageous effect on the South Fork of the St. Lucie. So we need to start acquiring properties and protecting them as best we can. So we're calling this the Loxa-Lucie because not only are there those benefits to the South Fork of the St. Lucie, but there are also benefits to the Loxahatchee River itself. So I'm an alternate on the Loxahatchee River Management Coordinating Council. And some of the print may be too small for you to follow in all of this, but the idea is that there is this Management Coordinating Council, and they follow the kinds of things that we're all concerned about in the Loxahatchee River. And so this particular graph is the most recent one that was presented to us at our September meeting. So it goes from January of 2019 through the end of August in 2020. And We don't need to get into the details of all the different numbers here. All you really need to know is green is good, yellow is acceptable, and red is not so good. So if you look in the critical element here of the minimum flows and levels, these are the number of days during this time period when the river has not gotten enough water to stop the saltwater intrusion and prevent the loss of more cypress trees. And so you see there's over 100 days during this last about year and 3/4. So what we're trying to do through this initiative is bring these lands that are currently in private ownership into a way that we can restore the hydrologic regime to try to get the right amount of water with the right water quality in the correct sort of delivery schedule to the Loxa-Lucie through the Kitchen Creek water flow. So we recognize that overall this is tens of thousands of acres. There's no way we're going to acquire it all. Some of the properties there aren't even willing sellers, but you got to start somewhere. And so we're disappointed that the state has not been able to move forward in the past, but we're taking this on as sort of a grassroots initiative. And what we have sort of prioritized here is a phase 1 acquisition that we are working on right now. So I've got several slides that talk about that. It's essentially a 2-mile stretch along the north side of Bridge Road that we've identified as this phase 1 acquisition. We think it's a key parcel because it controls the water flow through all of these green areas. This is actually a FEMA map. So the different shades of green, these are different kinds of wetlands, but essentially all those are wetlands that then feed in through either this central flowway or the eastern flowway down into either the North Fork of the Loxa-Lucie here, or this is Kitchen Creek going down into the designated wild and scenic portion of the Loxa-Lucie River. So a little bit more on the phase 1 acquisition here. It's, I said, 2 miles of frontage on Bridge Road. It's 138 acres in size. The key here is there's a willing seller. That sign has been out there along the roadside for several years. And as it says here, may divide. Well, we don't want them to divide it up into several parcels. We'd like to purchase all 138 acres and turn it into conservation. So a little bit more of the specifics of that. Here are these 3 different parcels. Parcel A on the west, a parcel B in the middle, and then parcel C over here to the right. We recognize that if we're able to acquire it, the lands had been used for cattle pasture land previously, so they are in a degraded condition where the water levels have been reduced. And so although the county would be interested in doing some water management here, without ownership of it, they're only able to do what's within the road right of way. So once we're able to bring this into conservation ownership, we'll be able to do a hydrologic restoration project on it. I mentioned that it is for sale. The new element that I've put onto this slide is the Urban Services District. And so the primary Urban Services District is in this kind of yellow shade and the secondary in the lavender shading. So you see with the current designation on it, what we could get out of this parcel are all these separate driveways off of Bridge Road and essentially individual houses on all of those lots. What we're hoping to do to bring it in, by bringing it into public conservation, is provide not only for water storage and retention like you see here, but also opportunities for recreation so that we can connect these up with Atlantic Ridge to the north and in the bigger picture down to Jonathan Dickinson in the south. So I've said we several times. You probably wonder who is the we? Certainly the Guardians of Martin County are a sponsor of this, a key sponsor, as is the Treasured Lands Foundation. And we're working with the Conservation Fund. Neither the Guardians nor the Treasured Lands have a lot of experience in acquiring lands for conservation, but indeed the Conservation Fund is a nationwide conservation organization that does have that specific experience and ability. So we're relying on them for the key components of this whole project. So I know many of you may not be too familiar with them, so I've got some information about that organization. We're working with Matt Sexton, a resident there in Sewell's Point, who has a long-standing knowledge and history of working in our area. He's the vice president for land acquisition for the southeastern United States, and certainly has a lot of experience here in the Loxa-Lucie River watershed. Just a little bit about their overall organization. We've got this nationwide map that shows the number of acres that they've been able to acquire and protect throughout the country. And then more specifically here in Florida, these are the number of different projects that they have worked on throughout Florida, which, as you see here, 46 of them here in the Treasure Coast area. A little bit about the schedule for all of this. The Guardians Board of Directors approved this back in November of 2019, as did the Treasured Lands Foundation Board. We had kind of a soft opening of the campaign in December of last year at our annual meeting. We have begun the fundraising for this phase 1 acquisition. And certainly COVID has affected our ability to do the outreach, but we started that in the spring. This is certainly a continuation of that effort. And our goal is that by May of 2021, we will have completed the fundraising for this phase 1 acquisition of somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million. We're very happy to say that we have now crossed the $1 million threshold of pledges and donations towards this phase 1 acquisition. The Conservation Fund is a nonprofit organization, so donations to them are tax deductible. If you're interested in knowing more about that, here's Matt Sexton's email address, and he certainly is the one that can answer any questions about tax deductibility and that sort of thing. This is information about how one could make a contribution. Certainly, I'm not here to solicit donations or contributions from any of you, but this is how donations can be made, and you can find more information about this on the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters website. What I am hopeful for today is that after some questions and answers, all of you will support this initiative overall and voice that support to the members of the board of directors of the Rivers Coalition, because what we are interested in getting ultimately is a letter of support or recommendation for the project from the Rivers Coalition. The Rivers Coalition is a very influential entity, and we would certainly appreciate your support with that. So with that, this is the closing slide, kind of showing what those headwaters look like. Kind of wet and marshy areas with some higher uplands where the pine trees are. Certainly not places for hundreds of homes, and we hope to bring it into conservation. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank
Greg, Daryl Brand here. Just wanted to let all of our members know, and whoever's watching, we always will include the PDF of Greg's presentation, and as always, we will have a recording of this Zoom meeting on our website right after the meeting.
If you have questions, please respond on the chat button on your phone. And I had a couple questions, Greg. My first question is, what's the relative flow sort of donation of the Palomar complex versus the Kitchen Creek complex? And also, what is the sort of the future of the obstruction and the flow restriction that Bridge Road causes or creates? Is there a plan for new culvertization? And I guess a third question is that I've been following the sort of the death toll of mammals and reptiles on Bridge Road that you all publish, and I wonder, as a greenway, is that functioning, or without sort of critter control on Bridge Road, is there a habitat obstruction that Bridge Road by itself causes and will have to be sort of probably expensively dealt with?
Okay, well, those are all good questions. I think I've gotten them. If I forget anything, remind me here. Your first one was about sort of the relative contribution of Kitchen Creek versus the Palmar watershed. And so indeed, the minimum flows and levels criteria that have been designated for the Loxahatchee River separate the whole Loxahatchee River into different watersheds. And so the Palmar is generally in a more westerly area, northwesterly of the of our general area, and the Kitchen Creek and our phase 1 acquisition here is the water that's flowing south from Bridge Road directly into the Northwest Fork. So it's all part of that whole sort of separate watersheds, but all feeding into the portion of the Loxahatchee that's the wild and scenic. I don't have the numbers on exactly what the different percentages are, but they're essentially those different sort of flowways. You asked about the extent to which Bridge Road is affecting that water flow. And it's kind of interesting, as we were getting into this, there have been a lot of studies that have been done on this going back more than 10 years. And it really shows how, you know, in Florida during the rainy season, it can rain on one side of the road and not on the other. That's essentially where we're at. The slope in this whole area is so gradual that for the most part, water is flowing north from the north side of Bridge Road towards the south. But up there about the area behind the Medalist is where the topographic slope is enough that water starts flowing northwesterly up around the Michael Jordan Golf Course and the Polo Fields area and into the South Fork. So I'd say probably 70 to 80% of the area within our project area is typically flowing south, and the balance of that is flowing northwest. There are a number of culverts underneath Bridge Road. So generally, Bridge Road, I wouldn't say is necessarily a dam. Certainly, as we have had a lot of rains during this past year, we have seen that water flows through those culverts pretty well. What we're trying to deal with is the fact that thousands of these acres already have a degraded water table because of ditches that have been put in to make them suitable for agriculture, for cattle, pasture land, and that sort of thing. So what that's doing is it's causing rainwater to flow off of those lands and directly into the river. If we're able to bring these into conservation, the concept would be to restore the hydrologic regime by plugging up those ditches, allow that water to sit there and then percolate slowly and recharge the aquifer, and allow, kind of like a normal wetland would do, you know, soak it up like a kidney and allow the water to then discharge down on a more gradual basis. You also mentioned the wildlife study. And yes, unfortunately, kind of a side aspect of all of this, as we have gotten into trying to analyze more about the whole watershed, we've noticed kind of a astonishingly disappointing amount of roadkill on Bridge Road. So we have begun a more rigorous study. We're going out twice a week trying to document what's going on there. And indeed, we've got over 400 incidents of animal roadkill on that road this year. Mammals, amphibians, reptiles, you name it, otters, wild hogs, wood storks, roseate spoonbills, all that sort of thing. So we've talked with the county, and the county is the owner and manager of Bridge Road, and they're certainly interested in trying to help us figure out ways to resolve that. In the big picture, what we would like to replicate is what has been successful down in Southwest Florida with the wildlife crossings for panthers. If you know anything about that, the state's process has been to replace some of those culverts with an actual wildlife crossing where there's not only an open area where the water can flow, but also a little land area where land mammals can walk through there. So we've talked with the county about doing that here on Bridge Road. There's some challenges with that because the water table is so high. And so they have looked into the cost for that. It's going to be about $1 million per structure to do that. So it's going to be a long-term sort of a capital improvement kind of project. But as we continue gathering data about that, both the species and the time of the year, we're hoping that at least we can start off with some signs or something like that that'll help address not only the roadkill, but it's also a human safety kind of a situation. Yes, you know, a snake or a frog isn't a big problem, but whoever hit that 8-foot alligator out there on the road, that's the kind of thing that will indeed cause a person to run off the road. And there has been one human mortality along that road. So we think that in this situation, what could be done to address the wildlife would also improve the human safety on the road as well. So it's kind of a long-term aspect of this, that if we had not been looking into sort of the environmental values of the whole Bridge Road corridor, we'd have never known that this was even a problem. What it's showing to us is that regardless of who owns the land and how it's managed, the animals are using the area between Jonathan Dickinson and Atlantic Ridge as a corridor. What we're trying to do is take it that next step and make it you know, a more protected sort of a corridor.
We have a question. We have a question from Blair Wickstrom. And what is the likelihood of using Amendment 1 money dollars for this acquisition?
I'd say realistically, probably not very good. As you know, the Amendment 1 monies were, a lot of them were redirected for other kinds of things. We've certainly been in coordination with the manager for both Atlantic Ridge and Jonathan Dickinson. I think Amendment 1 monies are less likely to come through for this than Florida Forever kind of monies. And so in the big picture, what our strategy is here is to, without any sort of public monies, raise the money to buy this $2.5 million, 138 acre stretch. And then if you know about the Florida Forever program, they've got a variety of ranking criteria. And part of the reason that that the Atlantic Ridge Florida Forever project has not scored well is, number one, there's a high dollar per acre cost, because here we are, South Florida in the east of 95 corridor. So right away, the land values are higher. And then sort of number two, we have not up until now had legislators from our area who have been strong advocates for this. So we believe that if we can acquire this tract, our strategy is to then offer it to the state free of charge, which gives us several points in the ranking criteria of what the state calls a bargain sale. All of a sudden, they're getting this 138 acres essentially for nothing. It's something that they wanted to do. And because we're also showing grassroots support, and now we've got more information on the wildlife, these are all factors that we're hoping when we go to the state, to the land acquisition folks, will improve that ranking in the Florida Forever project. So I think the likelihood of getting money from Florida Forever is a lot higher than through Amendment 1 monies.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, well, if not, I certainly appreciate your giving us the opportunity to talk about this project. We think it's something that is beneficial for the South Fork and for the Loxa-Lucie. And we hope that ultimately we'll get a letter of support from the Rivers Coalition.
Greg, thank you very much. That was informative, as well as I think, enlightening and uplifting. It's really great to see local residents caring for our local environments. Are you getting a lot of support from the county?
Yes, we have. The Ecosystem Restoration Division, both they and Public Works have been engaged with this, probably even more so after the flooding problems that Hobe Sound has had this past year. You know, we were engaged with them previously, but it was more from the Ecosystem Restoration Division. But now that they're trying to figure out how to make water flow uphill, all of a sudden they're seeing the advantages of being able to store, you know, I don't have the exact number, but lots of acre feet of water on not only this 138 acre parcel, but then the adjoining lands, if we can bring those into conservation as well.
We did get one more question from Doreen. Has anyone reached out to Michael Jordan and his golf course?
We haven't directly to him yet, but we have met with some of the other property owners along Bridge Road. And one of the things that makes us very encouraged with this is the folks from the polo fields. You know, those of you who have driven down Bridge Road, you see that most of it is wetlands or forested on one side or the other, except for the polo fields and some agricultural lands on the north side. Well, actually, the folks there have expressed an interest in working with us to identify a conservation easement corridor on their lands where they would actually do some ecological restoration. And so they've committed to working up sort of a plan for that, and to also talk with some of the adjacent owners of other agricultural lands. So, you know, we don't need to be the property owner, and certainly the Guardians and the Treasure Lands Foundation don't want to be the property owner for these. The idea would be those where there are willing sellers transfer the long-term maintenance and management responsibilities to the state, but engage those other agricultural property owners who are willing to commit to that restoration on their property as well, so that we can keep that green corridor the whole way through.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any other questions for Greg? I don't see any.
Jim, this is Charles Grandy. I don't have a question, but I do have a suggestion. Greg's ask, if you will, is for us to consider a letter of support. I'd suggest that Greg and his group should draft a proposed letter indicating what you would like to see in the letter of support from our group, which would make it a whole lot easier for us to review and decide how.
Charles, I think I got most of that. Your screen locked up a little bit, but yes, Greg and I spoke about that today. And I think the Guardians, and Greg in particular, is going to draft a letter, and the board will take that up perhaps at our next board meeting.
Yep, I'd be glad to do that. We have gotten those sort of endorsements from, let's see, the Loxa-Lucie River Management Coordinating Council, the town of Jupiter Island, the Martin County chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. And so indeed, I can, if you'd like to do it that way, I'll put a letter together and let your board of directors take a look at it and go forward. That would be great.
And you're accepting also interest from other membership boards from the Rivers Coalition?
Absolutely. Any of you who are representing other constituencies, whether you're homeowners associations within the South Fork watershed or not, now we're all facing these same kinds of concerns. So yes, on our loxalucieheadwaters.org website, we've got a drop-down menu for other information, and it's our intent to put in those kind of letters of support, no matter who they're from. Into that. So yes, that would be great.
Terrific. That's great, Greg. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Guardians and the Conservation Fund for showing as much interest in and Treasure Lands for showing as much interest in our territory as you do. And thank you for helping to protect the Loxa-Lucie and the Santa Lucie.
Thank you.
I neglected to ask if there are any elected officials in the audience. I did see Merritt was on board. Thank you for being here, Merritt. Are there any other elected officials?
Absolutely.
We're very grateful to the city for allowing us to when we're in person to share your facility, but also thank you for your support for the river.
I look forward to the time when we can have safe in-person meetings again. I know we all do. And the city wants to help the Rivers Coalition's agenda as much as we possibly can.
I
Thank
just
you very
spoke
much.
with Mikkel Vicat this week, and she says that the city manager is open to maybe January meetings, depending on COVID.
Really? Well, we had sort of decided, I guess somewhat unilaterally, that we were going to continue our Zoom meetings through the first, say, half of 2021, just because it was a more certain thing. But I think following up with the city is probably a very good idea.
We will keep the discussions open, and a lot of it depends on COVID and Thanksgiving. What the numbers show throughout the holiday season, really. They're not trending in the direction we want right now, but there's hope on the horizon, as we all know, with vaccines. So.
I have a question for Merritt. Right now you're having in-person meetings. With social distancing, how many people actually can fit into your room, just approximately?
Tough to say. 20 to 25. We're not, extremely strict on the number, but frankly, it's nowhere near the amount that the General Rivers Coalition audience fits at the moment.
We're at like 50 right now, or 46 right now.
Yeah. Normally our meetings, we have 70, 80 people in that room. So, okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
As soon as it's safe, I will move to reopen City Hall. I personally miss the in-person meetings. I'd like to take this time right now to let everyone know on our regular commission meeting, December 14th. The agenda is not out yet. It'll be Monday, December 14th. I've invited the Army Corps to come and present. And so that will be, you can access that Zoom. You can come in person. The meeting will start at 4 o'clock, but roughly 5:30 is the time when the Corps will present. And I've asked, I'm mostly interested in hearing from the Corps the management between basically present time with Lake Okeechobee and up till LOSUM is enacted. How are we going to go through this dry season, the next wet season, and what we can expect the next couple of years until we get, a new LOSUM schedule. So I encourage anyone to come. If we get a big turnout, we may possibly have the Flagler Center open, but again, our meeting will be on virtual as well, and we will have the chambers open, and in the hallway as well. There'll be TV screens for people to view.
Thank you, Merritt. Are there any other elected officials? I didn't see any in the list. Katie Bowles, would you like to present Martin County's water quality issues?
Yes. So sorry, my desktop doesn't have a webcam, so you'll just have to deal with the black box. But yeah, if you guys don't know me already, my name is Katie Bowles. I'm an environmental programs coordinator for Martin County in the Ecosystems Division. So thank you, Greg, for your presentation. I've already heard a lot about this project, and we're all so excited about it. So just a quick update, mostly LOSUM stuff. There is a project delivery team meeting tomorrow that I'd encourage everyone to attend. We have been working with the Corps and also the Water Management District on developing a coral performance indicator. So basically that would be used once the Corps gets a little further down the line and they put out their project alternatives. That would give some inkling for different flow schedules, what that impact would be, not just to adult corals, but to reproduction, which, coral spawning is so sensitive to any salinity fluctuation. For the data that we've collected, even, 33 parts per thousand can be detrimental to coral reproduction. So we've been working with them on that, and hopefully by the next meeting, I'll have a better update for you guys. Also, the Blue Green Algae Task Force meeting is ongoing right now. They are reviewing a harmful algal bloom performance measure that the Corps developed that would look at different schedules and different flow scenarios and try to give a risk or sensitivity analysis to HAB presence in the lake. So based on how the meeting was going this morning, the task force isn't too excited about it. So hopefully we'll get some improvements in that measure as well. C23 and C24 discharges to the estuary have dropped over 50% in the last week. So that is a little promising that the rain is slowing down. We did have a meeting with, or the media update with Colonel Kelly last Friday, and he did say that they have changed course slightly and they're predicting that discharges might continue for 2 to 3 months. I know that's really, discouraging and disappointing, especially since we can see even just visually that the estuary looks terrible. But it is kind of a catch-22 that we find ourselves in, because if you look at the lake stage probability on their daily status map, if they continue with Laura's schedule, it puts us around 16 feet going back into the next wet season, which we all know is pretty bad for risk of HABs in the estuary. So, we obviously don't want any discharges, but it is at least one silver lining that HAB presence right now is almost non-existent. So just something to think about, while we're, pondering releases now versus releases later, and how we that's kind of something how the county has to communicate with the Corps, looking at the future, not just the current. But we have been working with them. We did do a tour of the C44 reservoir yesterday with the Corps, and that is expected to be operational about 1 year from now, with them starting to fill some of those reservoirs as early as the spring. And that will be huge. It will take, 60% of the runoff from the C44 basin. So just some things to be hopeful about, even though we're having a hard time looking at our beautiful estuary right now. So that's all I have. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Katie, I had one question. Is the South Florida Coral Reef Initiative still functioning?
You mean SEFCRE? Yes, they are, and they are working with us on this coral performance indicator that we are working on developing with the Corps. We kind of brought both groups to the table, and they are providing the data and the expertise that document would be based on.
Good.
Question for Katie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Please go ahead, yes.
Katie, thanks for the report. I've been jumping back and forth this morning between the Blue-Green Algae Task Force meeting and this meeting, and I heard the task force members' dissatisfaction with that algae metric that you mentioned. And I know that's only one of 50 metrics that they're going to consider in LOSM, the new lake plan, but it's a really important one, and they seem to be minimizing it and using not the best data. So to the degree Martin County can press on that during the PDT meeting tomorrow and just on an ongoing basis. I think it's really helpful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have been working on kind of a supplemental letter that will include a lot of that information in there. And we are on the water quality sub-team meetings and have expressed, and we have even supplied additional data to them that they could use instead of this metric. So we've definitely been on their case about it, and will continue to do so.
That makes me feel better in one way, but on the flip side, the Army Corps clearly hasn't been adjusting because it's not sounding much better. So, and Jim Sullivan from Harbor Branch pointed out, he's on the task force, that NASA has data about real-time algae blooms right now from satellite imagery and other things, and they're just not using the best data. So we know how important that is. So thank you, and I hope they respond better in the future.
It also seems that, the only reason we don't have those algal blooms is because of weather, not because they're not there.
Right. Definitely the wind has been on our side for pushing more of that toward the littoral zone on the west side of the lake. But yeah, it is an uphill battle for this whole schedule process.
Thank you, Eve. That reminds me, we now have Eve Samples on our board of directors. Thank you very much, Eve, for taking Chris Maroney's place on the board of directors. It's a real pleasure to have you on board as a board person, and look forward to collaborating with you and your group.
Thank you.
Jim, Daryl here. I know that Paul Gray is on now. You might want to ask Paul if he's short time, if he has to get back to that meeting also.
Well, if you're available now, could you give your Lake Okeechobee report? We're just going to mix up the City of Stewart and South Florida Water Management, give you an opportunity to provide your report now. Paul,
Okay.
Gray?
Yeah, okay. So this is Paul Gray from Audubon. Yeah, Katie was right about the position of the lake right now. It's a problem. It's bad for the lake. There's too much water in it. If you look at the projections, they think it'll only drop to 14 or 15 feet in a quote unquote normal year. And so if we start the summer at 14 or 15 feet, that's very ominous for next summer, especially with all the water that went in this year. There probably would be some pretty substantial algae blooms next summer. But if we make more releases to try to lower the lake and get into a better starting position, then we threaten the spawn of good groupers and snappers and oysters next season. So, this is going to be kind of a slowly unfolding tale. We're going to have to work on the periodic scientist calls with the Corps to make a strategy for how can we lower the lake to the maximum extent possible, but with the least damage possible. And I really don't know the answer to that. But, this is why when we were looking at that resolution to get down to 11 feet every year, if we tried to do that this year, it would just be, it'd be devastation. So we'll work with the Corps. We'll try to keep you guys informed about what the options are. The lake really doesn't drop a lot until March, April, and May. So it's going to probably stay kind of deep. But one silver lining is we're at 16.34, and that's in the intermediate band. We're only 1/10 of a foot above the low band. And once they get in the low sub band, then they're going to have more flexibility. Yeah, see that green line? Once they drop below that green line, it lowers the release requirements or release recommendations. So they're going to have more flexibility. And on the last call, we talked about, well, could we just take the estuary and just stop releases for 3 days or 4 days or some formula like that to let the salt come and go and let the oysters catch their breath and then kind of resume whatever we're patterned. And I think those options will be open in another 1/10 of a foot on the lake. And so they're not going to have a periodic scientist call next week, but they're going to have one the week after. And we've recommended that they keep talking to the estuary people. And of course, Martin County was on there, Katie and the crew and John and all that. And Lee County also was on there. So I think we're going to get into a place where we can start doing management actions that are prescripted and not just, reactive because the lake's so deep and it does look like the drier weather. And as Eve said, switching topics, the Blue-Green Algae Task Force is looking at the algae predictor metric for Lake Okeechobee, and it's not real robust. It's got kind of low correlations. But the question is, can it just give us a general idea between alternative 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Can it tell us which one's more likely to be algae risky and which one's likely to be less risky? And so that was the question I put to the task force is, will you guys weigh in on, we know this thing's not perfect and more development would be better, but is it good enough to just let a layperson look at different alternatives and say, this one's more likely to get us algae, this one's less likely to get us algae? Does it give us a good enough idea of that to use it? Is it useful for that purpose? And that's going to be kind of the question that they're going to, I hope, address in the future. Because if they don't, here's the problem. Basically, when the lake gets deep, you tend to have more algae risk. And it's just the way it works. And so if they take that out and we'll look at the stage envelope for the lake and we see that we're above it all the time, well, as a scientist, I know, well, that means we're probably going to be in algae risk zone more. But the average commissioner or governing board member or just lay citizen is going to look at that and they're not going to see an algae metric up there that says this one's more risky for algae, this one's less risky. So what they do with this metric, I don't know, but I hope we can keep some sort of an algae indicator in there for people so they can make that decision when they compare different alternatives. And that's what we're going to kind of have to work with the Corps and help them get to. If the blue-green algae task force says this one's not up to snuff, then what do we use? So that's the question.
Well, do we have the data required to make a judgment over pulse releases through the dry season?
I don't.
Yeah.
Not yet. And there is a prediction for a La Nina, which is a relatively drier dry season. So it might come down more than average. And so some of these projections that we're looking at might be projecting the lake to be higher than what it's actually going to happen. But again, I think we're going to have to kind of get through the next month and then kind of get a new projection of what the water's going to be like. Because they do their seasonal projections at the beginning of every month. And the November projection was done before Ada came through here and changed everything. So we're going to have to get to December and see what the new projection is and then readjust our sites. So, and again, on December 1st, we'll have 6 months before June 1st. So there's going to be a lot of time to respond and manage, but I don't have a good idea about what are the best choices yet.
Are there any questions for Dr. Gray?
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. Ben Hogarth, you're up.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks, Jim. I just want to say everybody's taking my thunder. I was going to talk about some of these subjects today. But thanks, Eve, for bringing up the blue-green algae task force. That's one of the most important things that's happening today, I think. I listened to in what Dr. Gray said to kind of go off of that as well. It does seem like Dr. Graham, Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Pepperson, I don't want to take anybody's thunder away also. They did an amazing job really identifying the significant flaws in the framework, the methodology of using chlorophyll A especially as kind of like a sole indicator, a sole determinant of even of their preliminary modeling. I had problems with this months ago. I know the county certainly wasn't very confident in it. So the good news is our scientists in that task force are doing a great job to kind of nitpick everything from their whole methodology of using a regression model for something that has nothing to do with orders of magnitude all the way to looking only at chlorophyll A versus temperature of water, wind. I mean, all these other calculations that what's happening is this, to break it down very simply, what I see, the Army Corps is kind of, they've got a stage envelope, a stage and flow modeling system, and they're trying to figure out and back in basically this qualitative indicator based on quantitative data to fit into a model system that is really about level of the lake. And kind of like what Dr. Gray hinted at was that, yeah, that might help you to determine a forecast that you might have a higher probability of having algae in the lake a certain year, but we're seeing algae in the lake almost every year now, regardless irrespective of the lake level. So kind of what some of the doctors had said during the task force meeting is, what we need to know is not that chlorophyll A determines the stage, but whether or not the stages determine the chlorophyll. And so there's a lot of data that's missing, and I don't think they were at all satisfied with the Corps'. So the good news is the Corps is leaning on this task force to provide them metrics for really operational decisions that will come after kind of the LOSUM models are created. So the stuff that commanders and officers in the field and civilians in the field will use to make decisions, that's part of the operational plan that comes after this modeling session that we're in through kind of July next year. So the good news is there's still hope, there's still time to reach them, but it was concerning for a lot of people. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense of how complicated the problem is. It's just that the Army Corps is limited, and they're really stuck in this ancient modeling system that they have that really only has to do with stage and flow, because that's really their legal parameter. That's what they control. So anyway, I hope that makes more sense about that. But definitely pay more attention to the Blue-Green Task Force, because they're tasked, especially through January, February, of trying to help the Corps come up with other ways in which to use model analyses in variables and the weighting of those variables regarding harmful algal blooms. So anyway, that's the Blue-Green Algae Task Force. I just want to mention that. As far as LOSUM 2022, they're finishing the Pareto analysis now. We're going to be getting the results and talking about that in tomorrow's PDT meeting, as well as maybe in December as well. And starting in January, February, through July next year, we're going to be going through alternative arrays, iterations of different types of management models of the lake, and narrowing them down first to about 9 or 10 schedule alternatives down to 3, and then settle kind of on one primary by July. And that will go into the Corps' development of an environmental impact statement and their NEPA document sometime after July. So that's that schedule. And then the last thing I'll mention is the periodic scientist call. Just wanted to thank Dr. Gray again for being so vocal on those calls all the time, and everybody else. Mark Perry is not here right now. He's also very vocal, especially about the health of the lake and the estuaries. The one good thing that came out of that call was that Martin County, the city of Stewart, we all advocated for some kind of reprieve in the interim. We recognize that Hurricane Eta, some of the weather that we've seen this tropical season, the amount of rainfall has been near biblical, even regardless of a direct impact from a hurricane. So we're dealing with a lot of water, obviously, and the consequences of that water going downstream from the Kissimmee chain there. But what we were hoping to do is in the next couple of weeks convince the Army Corps, if we do see a dry spell here, to take an opportunity to give the river, the estuary, some kind of reprieve if there would be a measurable benefit from S80 discharges. And the question is whether or not, S23, 24 discharges in basin runoff, if that is still so high that even just shutting down the S80 still wouldn't provide a tangible benefit to salinity levels. So there's a question there, but we're advocating for some kind of reprieve right now. So that's something else we did in the interim. But happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. So do you feel as though the county or the city has the data required to make the recommendation that we have intermittent discharges from S80?
The city, unfortunately, we just don't have those resources. The county, we're kind of really relying on their team to provide something to the Corps in tandem with the Corps. The city just stands ready to support whatever the county wants to support. We're kind of in team with that. I'm personally leaning more towards, with the forecast, the weather forecast, the tropical system forecast in the next couple of weeks. I would lean towards giving the river some kind of reprieve, but I don't know. I don't know if even with the data, if there would be a qualitative way to determine whether or not there would be a tangible benefit. I don't know if there is a way to measure that, given the circumstances. They know obviously what the amount of CFS is, let's say from the basin and C23 and 24. They can measure that in comparison with the S80 discharges. But if it's still, let's say, over 1,000 CFS, the question is, would that provide a real benefit? And unless you do it, I don't know how you know otherwise. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and this is Paul again. As of this morning, about 2/3 of the flow coming out of the lake is your estuary flow. So you guys have just about cleared your basin runoff. And that was one of the questions, is if the basin's still running off, then shutting off the lake doesn't matter. But it looks like you're over the hump with your basin runoff. So damping down the lake probably would help a lot, either now or in the next few days. So again, this is going to be a very active couple weeks and trying to get relief as soon as we can. And then a very active 6 months with trying to figure out what we do with the lake this spring, but also with LOSIM, because as Ben said, they plan to have a selected schedule in July. So it's time for all of us to pay attention and do our work as much as we can.
I guess the other question I keep having is whether, increasing volume and decreasing duration makes some sense, blow it out and then let it recover. And I just don't know the answer.
That I posed the same question to Savannah from the Corps, Jim, and I talked to John Mayle about it too. And we all have what Savannah's response to me didn't satisfy, my desire to know more. She kind of put it off on the district and said it was really the district scientists they were leaning on to and staff to kind of give them insight and guidance into that. To me, that was kind of like a little bit of a buck pass. It wasn't answering substantially the question of, did anyone at any time actually run any kind of simulation or at least attempt it in the past, where you had, I'll give you an example, you could have 4 days on, 3 days off, depending on obviously tide schedule and everything else, but you could potentially have 4 days on at about 3,100 CFS and 3 days completely off where you're only getting basin runoff or whatever else. And that could potentially be enough days in a row to have, some kind of oxygen, some kind of salinity envelope benefit, but there's no way of knowing unless you test it, I think. It's almost like a real life experiment, and I don't know how many people are comfortable with that, so.
Yeah, I also wonder about suspended solids and actually having enough velocity to carry some of that out of the inlet rather than letting it sit on the bottom.
Jim, let me chime in here. Right now, my short-term goal is to look at, when we do, as Paul Gray just said, when we get the C23 and C24 basin to start drying up, is to really just give our estuary a breather of 3 to 5 days and let us assess the salinity, say, at the Roosevelt Bridge. I mean, that's the main goal. And then the discussion for handling the lake and how the releases out of the S80 and where we'll be looking at the end of the dry season towards lake level will come second. But right now, our estuary's been totally fresh for, in the high number of, 28 plus or minus days or so. And so, the top priority for me is to get the estuary a breather of 3 to 5 days. But, the Corps pushing back that closing the S80 won't matter until the C23 and C24 basins kind of reduce their flows as well naturally. So that's what we're looking for. And that's what I'll be pushing in my conversations with the Corps personally.
And Jim, this is Blair. I'm not sure if, am I able to speak now?
Yes, you are.
Again, I think the big picture is we still need to look at where we can send water other than our estuary, because historically we've been able to, when we pick and choose, we can send more water south. Right now, I believe this year we've sent about 85,000 acre feet into the STAs from the lake. In 2015, we keep looking back at that. They understood then that they could take more water from the lake and put it into the STAs. with 500,000 acre feet. We're at 85,000 now. Instead of resigning to a boom or bust or how we're going to take more water into our estuary, we need to talk about how we're going to send it south and fill the entire system. And again, that's what LOSUM is doing. We're working on trying to figure out the whole system, not just the lake management. And it's not just by June 1st. So, you know, Dr. Gray talks about, you know, not being able to get to 11 feet on June 1st every year. My feeling is we need to focus on getting to 11 feet or whatever it is to stop the discharges. And clearly we're going to have to get down. It's going to be a lot of work for us to get down to 11 feet or less by June 1st right now. But we need to start working on that now with LOSUM to make sure that we're talking about getting the water somewhere else other than the St. Lucie estuary. And right now, 85,000 feet into the STAs from the lake is not acceptable. If they're not taking water because they're saving capacity to drain the EAA sugar fields instead of the lake, we don't have the priorities straight and we're not at the table. And so that, again, I think that's what we still need to focus on is no discharges to the St. Lucie estuary.
Agreed. Dan Goldberg, did you have a question you wanted to ask everybody?
Thank you for recognizing me. It's not a question, but a comment that I did put in the chat, that what happens in St. Lucie County, where I live, is also important to your area too, to the river. And the St. Lucie County Planning and Zoning Commission is having a meeting tonight. And what they want to do is lower the open space requirement for businesses, and from 35% to 25%. And right now, I don't think this is a good idea since we're already having so much problems between pollution and climate change, which will also cause in the North Fork sea rise problems with the heat in the ocean of and even in the river of killing seagrasses and corals reefs. And I think this is a big problem. And it really hurts the economy, and we need to let them know that it's not helpful to have more businesses who want to do more damage because it hurts our tourism too. This is long-term as well as now, and we can't expect them to and they're saying, well, we just want to be like the city of Port St. Lucie and Fort Pierce, who only have 25%. And just because they're not being environmental does not mean the county should do the same thing. They need to do more, though, of course, at this time, we can't expect them to do more, but we certainly need to stop them from doing less. And one of the other things that they're saying they want to do is broaden staff's ability to go ahead and allow all these changes that they want to make for the benefit of businesses without going through the normal channels to speed up these businesses going in. Not good for what we consider important, because they do not have the environment education to make sure they're doing something right. So I'm asking everybody to either send an email to public comment at stlucieco.org and say that you're against these changes, or there is a telephone number to call since it is so late before the meeting that you can also contact them. And I can put that telephone number in the comment too.
Thank you, Diane. We will, please everybody notice the comment, the chat room board. Jackie Throw-Lipish, are you available?
Yes, I'm available.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody. I'll try to be brief since it's getting close to 12:30. A few months ago, the South Florida Water Management District and myself as part of that went out and met with Greg Braun and Martin County and saw the situation along Bridge Road for the Loxa-Lucie, and the thing the district would have something to do with that would be the culvert situation. And so I continue to try to just educate people that I can touch, reach within the South Florida Water Management District to situations in our area. Specifically at the meeting, a positive thing is that the district passed $64 million. It's a lot of money to go toward finishing out the stormwater treatment area for the EAA reservoir. The South Florida Water Management District is keeping its end of the bargain on this. Of course, the other portion of it is the Army Corps, which is a little more fragile. And that requires us continuing to push. And a lot of that depends on the WRDA bill, which is in a very fragile situation this year as well with our political turmoil right now. At the South Florida Water Management District meeting, of course, the Colonel of the Army Corps was there. The head of FWC was there, and of course, the district. And from what I have been told, and the numbers that I have seen, over 1 million acre feet of water has gone through the stormwater treatment areas this year. And I have to, is it water year or they do it in water year. So it would be water year so far. And, you know, everything is full right now. The water, everything is full. The district would be sending more water south if it could, but it can't. And nobody's holding out for agriculture or anything else. There is no place to put the water. All of the conservation areas are over schedule. You can go in there and look at the schedules and see where they are. It's been like this for a lot. It's not just based on flow, of course, it's based on rain. And there's been a ton of rain down there, particularly in that Broward area, which covers Water Conservation Area 3 and Water Conservation Area 2. I went down there myself just because I'm a big wildlife lover, and went with FWC to do a spotlight tour of the deer and other animals that are all up on the levees because of the high water down there. And it makes me sick to see what we have done to wildlife in this state. What, you know, fish and wildlife is one thing, it's our wildlife. And we have to send more water south. That is the answer, I think. And the big discussion was on the 8.5 square mile area, which is an area that kind of makes it really impossible or hard to send more water into Everglades National Park. And the whole thing is so messed up. I mean, it's all like a Carl Hiaasen novel, every part of it. And then they're reporting on the pythons, you know, 2,000 pythons caught. The longest one, almost 19 feet, beat Mr. Bergeron's 18 feet. I mean, it's like, where do we live? It is really hard. But we have got to keep advocating for all of the excellent things that you all are talking about. It is so exciting to see how engaged everybody is, all the stakeholders and all the different groups. Everybody's doing a great job. We have infiltrated the system ourselves, and that's what we have to do for change. It's very unfortunate that the river looks like it looks right now. We are nowhere close to where we were in 2016 or 2013. And so I thank God for that every night when I go to sleep. And I also wake up at night thinking about the deer starving to death on those levees. And we put them in that position because those deer years ago lived right here, where we, in the pine lands, where we developed our houses. So, you know, I am doing my best. I am trying to keep pushing forward. I am meeting as many people as I can. And I appreciate everything all of you all do. And believe me, the governor wants.
You got muted, Jackie. You need to unmute you.
Sorry, so
Yeah.
please keep up the good work. It's great. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jackie. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thanks, Daryl. Sorry, I muted myself. Jackie, thank you very much for all you do. And your sensitivity and interest in your advocacy is really welcome. We very much appreciate it, all of us.
Jack, real quick, you mentioned the 8.5 square mile area. Can you explain like what's that about and how is it affecting their ability to move the water in the southern end of the system?
Thank you, Todd. In a nutshell, the 8.5 square mile area is an area that kind of sticks out into Shark River Slough, where they need to be able to get the water to move south. And there's a long history there. And basically, there is a border that was set years ago that said, kind of like an urban service boundary, that nothing was to be developed outside of that border. Well, guess what happened in Miami-Dade? It was developed, and it was developed because, thank you very much, because the Miami-Dade Commission supported it over time. And I don't want to get into anything that's like, looking at anybody completely, but there were people who were squatting on that land. And when you think about what was happening in Miami in the 80s and 90s, so people were living out there and they were, starting farms and building things that shouldn't be out there. And then the commission supported it over time. And the Army Corps got in a situation where they had to provide a certain level of flood control to these people. And now there's about 300 homes out there. And so during the South Florida Water Management District meeting, we were talking about taking the land. That is not something that you hear out of very often anymore. And it is because there is an area that is not the whole thing, but the area that is closer to the west that is really infringing upon the ability of the water to go south. So just to kind of give you an example, about a month ago, I was invited with a few other, with other people to go to this groundbreaking ceremony down there at Tamiami Trail for the S333, which is a structure that the district has been putting tons of money in and whatever to send more water south. And it's complicated. They have to fill up the canal along the road. And then the little sparrows that live down there, of course, sometimes they have those gates closed. So it's a big fight. But the bottom line was we all went down there to celebrate with our golden shovels. And aren't we great? Look at everything we're doing. And right now, we can't send any water through that structure. Billions of dollars in infrastructure to send more water south, but we can't send any water through that structure because we would flood the 8.5 square mile area. Todd, can you show where it's located?
Yeah, I was just highlighting it.
That's yes,
right here with 95 CFS going through it, which is a trickle.
Todd, show me where you are. I can't see.
I don't know if you can see my mouse. You kind of see my mouse moving right here. You're talking about the 333 right here.
Yeah, but the 8.5 mile, Todd. Yeah, there you go.
Jackie, is it right in here somewhere?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, like here's kind of the edge of the Everglades, and it's on the other side of the edge.
And you have to think about when you're looking at something like this, and we should all think about it more and more, that when this was how it was 200 years ago and thousands of years ago, natural, the flow of the Everglades from Lake Okeechobee flowed to the east towards Broward County and Dade County mostly. And so the water wants to go this way. And so we keep trying to push it to the west, but the natural thing is to allow it to go to the east. And so they're talking about a seepage wall or taking part of the land, you know, in the front. And I'm sure the people that live there are like freaking out when they hear those words, but of course you would have to pay them everything that was a fair amount. But the more water that you can send south, absolutely, the less you have those water conservation areas filled up. And then you can send more water from the estuaries through Lake Okeechobee, through the stormwater treatment areas and through. So we are really connected, and we all know that.
Hey, Jackie, thanks for that. And thank you for acknowledging how sometimes those golden shovel events feel a little incongruous with what we're experiencing on the ground. So I hear you, and district staff has told me too that everything's full to the south. And I think it makes the case for moving more water south during the dry season all the more important, right? If we didn't hold back so much water for the EAA during the dry season, and this is an unusual year, but perhaps even this year it would have made a difference. So I think there's a really strong case for looking at how the public policy stands right now, so we can do more of that.
I think so too. And let's just dissect this, you know, briefly here. Why can't we send more water south during the dry season? Why don't we? Is it because it's legal, or is it just because the district and the Army Corps decide to hold it in there because they want to? How come that water is held in there? What is the aspect that is keeping that in place?
I'd like to say that I think most of it is because the farms and ranchers demand it, because they're using those areas for their own personal use for water storage. I think we really need to push for legislation to have these farms and ranches required, not just asked, but required to have a certain percentage of their own property for their storage. And then we would be able to use that Lake O water for those EAAs.
Thank you, Diane. That's, I think part of the problem with that is that the water is permitted, which means the water is promised. It's legal. They are legally owed that water, just like I'm legally owed water when I open my faucet up in my house. So these are definitely, our problems are legal problems. That's how I see it. All of our problems are legal problems. And that's why we have to keep on doing what we're doing, like with Todd just showing that really good example of the 8.5 square mile area. We have to, you guys, we have a new legislature in. They just went up there to do their like opening ceremonies, I think 2 days ago. We have got to be on them, whether you're best friends with them or not. Gail Harrell, Toby Overdorf, John Snyder, you know, these are our voices. And now the president of the Senate is somebody who's very, he's very tied into agriculture. I think he has a chicken factory, or I shouldn't say it like that. He has a big business. So, you know, and then Chris Sprouse is now the new speaker. And read the comments these people are making. You know, we can, I'm not trying to be tough, but I mean, we can sit here and have these meetings every day of the week, but until we get into those places, like I'm trying to do, you know, what I can in the district, it's like lifting 1 billion pounds, but we have to get into those places. We have to infiltrate them, and we have to fight for legal change, just like Brian Mast is on the congressional side. But, you know, we have to put our time, effort, and money into getting involved where the rubber meets the road, and that is legally.
Jackie, this is Blair, and you had mentioned the amount of water that's gone through the STAs this year. And I think it's a good number and it's a lot of water, but unfortunately it's very little water from Lake Okeechobee. And so I think if we can, if the number is a million acre feet, is that what you had mentioned? And if the number is correct, 85,000 acre feet that's come from the lake, it's really a disproportionate number where the bulk of that million acre feet has come from the EAA.
It is, Blair. And it's like that because as I understand it, but I'm not a lawyer, I need somebody like my brother, or I need somebody smarter than me to look at the law. And they tell you that those stormwater treatment areas legally were put into place for the EAA. They weren't put in for the lake. And so until those kind of things can be breached, they will always have the advantage because I hope you understand what I'm saying. I want it to change, but we have to find a way to address it legally, I think.
And that's what we need to work on.
Yeah, and just let me add, that all this shows the need for more storage in the whole system, whether it's north of the lake or wherever. We're using what lands we currently have, but like what we're trying to do with the Loxa-Lucie, it's all coming down to you gotta buy the land, you gotta, in one way or another, increase more storage so that everybody isn't afflicted with this problem of having too much water.
Well said.
Jackie's point is also good, that you need to renegotiate the consumptive use permits at some point, because that's another part of this problem. And perhaps eminently domaining, taking some of the 8.5 acre or 8.5 mile area in order to get a seepage wall put in, maybe also part of that. But and that takes a lot of political will.
Right, and that would be with the help of the federal government.
It'd have to be. I mean, this is part of the problem with defederalizing, is that you don't have the federal government in there doing the work that the state legislature is reluctant to do also.
Exactly. And the good news is I think it's amazing all the progress that we've made, even though we're still in a bad situation. The whole, the Army Corps, we have changed the culture of things. It's just hard to see it sometimes because we're still in such a bad place. But we have got to keep going because look at the Army Corps looking at the algae. I mean, they never did before. They would have never done it if we hadn't had the whole uproar that we've had since 2013. And all of us play our role. And I want more than anything for the St. Lucie River to have no discharges. We just have to figure out how to really achieve that.
Well, Jackie, thank you for your help. We are now at the River Kids. Do we have a quick update from the River Kids?
No, I don't have too much to add, except I would like to encourage everyone to please go on riverscoalition.org website and go under the River Kids tab and utilize our new workbook that came out in the spring. Unfortunately, as you all know, we weren't able to print it because the schools couldn't even get it. They were out of commission. So we're not printing it as of yet, but we really would like to spread the word to please look online and use it and tell anyone teachers or different people in 501c3s or environmental organizations to utilize that, please. And that's all I have.
It's really a great workbook. Thank you, Nick. Local issues. We're still pressing the South Florida Water Management District to provide a seagrass survey update. Indian River Keeper. Mike, are you there?
I am, yes. Do you have me, Jim?
Yeah, you're echoing pretty badly. There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm going to put this device away. I do have two devices here. I have two screens to share. Is that echoing still, Jim?
Yeah, just turn your speakers down on your computer.
Yeah, let me do that. Hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I had a few points to make, which have been covered pretty well by everybody that spoke in front of me. That's okay. I do want to say I have had some conversations with Drew Bartlett, DEP, and he's been very good to get messages to Colonel Kelly and back to me. In my mind, I thought last week I was encouraged by seeing the local basin numbers drop pretty drastically as far as inflow, and I thought that's a heck of a good week to go ahead and stop the SAD discharge during a king tide. Sadly, that didn't come to fruition. It wasn't done. But I think we have to keep pushing the message that we need to get salt in the estuary. All my water sampling yesterday, I went as far south as Sanskrit, 4 areas, and I only had 4 parts salt at Sanskrit on a falling tide. That's destructive, really bad. And there's 0 salinity at I think 33 of the last 37 days at Roosevelt Bridge, if I'm not incorrect. The rest of the week, the last couple of weeks, I have, my waterway is 160 miles long, so I am spending some of my time up north. I'm going up Monday to the Titusville area to meet some folks, new people I'm adding to my board of Indian Riverkeeper. Plus, I'm going to do a few more Facebook Lives up there. So if you want to go to our Facebook page, Indian Riverkeeper, you can see some waterways up there that you otherwise may not see at all in your travels. But there's just a horrific, bloom. I'm going to share screen real quick here, if I may. I know it's not anyway, this is our neck of the woods right here, as you can see. Not pretty. This is what I'm seeing everywhere from the North Fork to South Fork. And also during the strong southeast winds this week, a lot of that discharge water, I think it's lost on some folks that discharge water from the lake does make it up to the Jensen Causeway. And I definitely think that's something that's a lot of folks don't see. If you see the photo, okay, there, that is the Hell's Gate area yesterday. Pretty dismal, my water readings. Other than that, the next week there's a big nanoplankton bloom happening from Melbourne north all the way to New Smyrna. The only really encouraging part of this whole estuary to me, the RL right now, the only section is probably from south of Melbourne to about Vero Beach. South of that, the Taylor Creek has been putting an astronomical amount of really bad water in that part of the estuary. Depending on the wind and the tide flow, it affects all the area from Round Island up to Vero Beach. The rain we had on top of the rain we already had before Etta, it just illustrates the fact that we have a lot of inflows of our own to deal with. The area from approximately Jensen Beach north, as soon as that wind blows, I have never seen it so turbid. And it's a lot to do with the tannins coming into the river, but that whole project, the shoreline of Indian River Drive years ago, that when they bolstered that shoreline, it was a botched job. It was poor. The substrate they used, the dark soils, it makes that place horrifically muddy. And most of the landowners along there and property owners I know are just, they're over it. They realize that every time we have a windy event during the winter, we have the big cold fronts, northeast winds. That area along there, the reason the seagrass is going away is partially because of sediment and partially because it's all resuspended in the river. And I'm looking forward to this week, maybe get a little break with the wind and go out and actually see some bottom. It's not easy right now. Yesterday, the only place I saw bottom on my land-based patrols was the pier by Selfish Flats across the street from Bathtub. The Bathtub's closed, but I walked to that pier and walked out there and I found that beautiful green push of water over Sailfish Flats. And that was pretty encouraging, but it's the only place in the entire area that there's any water that looks healthy at all. So I'm looking forward to going out to Sailfish Flats and walking those flats and seeing just what this last 2-3 months has done to whatever grass had recovered. And much of the grasses I'm seeing up north in the IRL, up as far as Vero, most of it is macroalgae that are on the shorelines after wind events. It piles up. And it's just heartening to see it's taking the place of seagrasses. And I'm hoping this is not a regime change for us in time like Biscayne Bay. Biscayne Bay is seeing a total regime change because of the loss of seagrass in that bay, North Bay. And I'm just fearful that if we don't have some good clear water in the next few months, which we normally have in winter, we're going to see a further loss of seagrass. So I wish I had some rainbows and things and sunny news for you, but that's what I'm seeing in the field. And if you get a chance, our website, we have a new revamped website, theindianriverkeeper.org. Check our website out. We're right now we're concentrating also on fundraising, and I will say we're doing fundraising virtually on Facebook and on the website through auctions and raffles. And I hope if you have the time to look at some of the great items we have, great fishing trips being donated by some great captains in our area, very generous donations. I hope you'll check out our site and our Facebook. And that's what I have today.
Jim, Todd Weissing is back on for Speakers Bureau.
Sure. Let me just say that the Speakers Bureau, do you hear me, Daryl?
Yes.
Okay. So the Speakers Bureau is open for business. All the organizations are, if they're meeting using WebEx or Zoom. So we are open. If you are having a meeting, you would like a speaker, our talks are anywhere in length from 15 minutes to 45 minutes, including questions and answers. If you would like a speaker, just contact the Rivers Coalition at info@riverscoalition.org or go to the website, and we've got some hyperlinks there that request a speaker. We'd love to bring our message out to the public. Thanks, Daryl.
Jim, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Todd, for all you do. And Todd does a great job, and the other speakers do a terrific job as well. And if you want to get informed, he's a great resource. Eve, I think there were a couple questions for you about the time or the date for Carl Hyacин's meeting.
Sure, happy to talk about that. Thank you for indulging me. So Friends of the Everglades is hosting a happy hour virtually, of course, with Carl Hyacin and Maggie Hirchala, who both were generous enough to donate their time. So it is December 8th, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. I popped a link in the chat. If you're a member of our Marjorie Circle program, it's free. If you're not, it's $25. Thanks for asking.
Thanks, Eve. Are there any other updates from the membership? We're running a little long. Sorry.
Jackie, I think Jackie was raised her hand.
Jackie?
I just wanted to say for Todd, my brother, and you, that the South Florida Water Management District is doing nothing with seagrass until it starts to grow again. During winter, they stop. They don't even report it at the meeting, but maybe during this time, we can get in place what you're looking for.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for bringing that up to the board as well. Are there any other member comments? We're going to take the month of December off from regular meetings and rejoin with sort of the membership meeting in January. So it will be on the fourth Thursday of the month at 11 o'clock, and look forward to seeing you all then. In the meantime, please have a very safe and happy holiday season. And also the newsletter is always a good place to post your comments. And please, everybody, look at the comment board or the chat board and connect to those websites if you've got interest either in the Blue-Green Algae Task Force meeting, the LOSA meeting, and also the St. Lucie County County Commissioners meeting, as well as the Friends of the Everglades meet and greet with Carl Hyacin and Maggie Hirchala. And Jackie Thurla, thank you very much for all you do. Greg Braun, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And Barbara Osborne, thanks a lot for doing all you do. And my fellow board members, thank you. State and local representatives, thank you very much for doing all you do. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to everybody. Stay safe.